Good morning, everyone. See folks starting to trickle in. As you are joining, I would love to welcome you to our webinar on equitable recovery after the LA fires on behalf of Philanthropy California. If you are new to our alliance refers to Northern California grantmakers, SoCal grantmakers, and Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial counties. We are, of course, SoCal grantmakers. And so this alliance represents about 600 different funders from community foundations, corporate philanthropy, giving circles, family philanthropy, and local government agencies who invest billions every year to support communities across the state, country, and worldwide. We are presenting this webinar in partnership with Center for Disaster Philanthropy, Cal OES, and League of California Community Foundations. So thank you very much to our partners. You are entering this webinar on mute unless you are a speaker. And so as our speakers present, please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A box. We will try to get through as many as possible. We have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. Our staff is going to be monitoring the chat and providing resources when available. So please feel free to share your thoughts and engage with each other and ask questions as they come up. And so this is the last out of 5 public funder briefings that SCG has provided since the beginning of the LA fires. So special thanks to our programs and conferences team for standing up this series and allowing for this space. There is a recap of all of our past briefings, which I will share here in the chat if you're interested in putting this all in context. And just because this is the last briefing, it does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that the conversation itself will stop. These briefings did lay the groundwork for more strategic funder coordination in the LA Wildfire Recovery Funders Collaborative, which convenes monthly to provide this landscape view of everything that's happening in disaster philanthropy for the wildfires. And there are a lot of different tables. And so I encourage you to look into this collaborative as well as reach out to me personally if you are interested in attending these meetings. Our next one is on June 10th. And so today we are here to focus on equitable recovery. And I wanted to offer some level setting to just go through what exactly do we mean by that. For equitable recovery, this means centering frontline communities, addressing pre-existing inequalities in those communities, building local power and agency at the grassroots level, investing in long-term resilience and not just that short-term relief phase, and supporting cultural and social restoration and not just the physical infrastructure rebuilding. So in Altadena, which is a historically redlined community, equitable recovery perhaps means people who are displaced getting to come home. And in the wider Eaton area, ensuring renters, seniors, immigrant families, low-income households have a real seat at the table in determining the vision for recovery. And in the Palisades, which is a completely different community, this also requires us to look past surface level assumptions of wealth. We know that 20% of multifamily housing in the Palisades did burn, and not everyone is going to experience recovery equally. And we still need to ensure that the needs of renters, domestic workers, caregivers, and landscapers, many of whom commute into the area or live in secondary units or older housing stock, are not invisible in this recovery process. And so today, my hope is that throughout the conversation, you're going to hear from leaders whose vision is driving recovery at that local level, as well as at the grass tops level that engages with policy makers, decision makers that are going to drive this process throughout that long arc. And so with that, I would love to introduce the speakers that we've brought into the fold today to be with us. We have with us Matt Peterson, President CEO of Lacey and Chair of the Blue Ribbon Commission. We have Andrew King from Department of Angels and representing the Survivor Network altogether, Jill Hawkins from the Eaton Fire Collaborative, and Mei Sung from Team Palisades. We're really looking forward to engaging in dialogue with all of you. Matt, do we have you? Could we invite you on camera? I might start with you.
Yeah, let me just pull it over right now.
Sounds good. For those of you joining us and those of you especially who have been involved in recovery, you'll know that every day has been a series of meetings. It is nonstop. So Matt being in commute, we're really really grateful that you're able to join us. Whenever
Yeah,
whenever you can safely do so, I'd love to start with the question of, can you just tell us about your role at Lacey and at the Blue Ribbon
yeah.
Commission, what it is?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm actually just driving into Altadena right now for another um, related meeting. But Lacey is known as the LA Clean Tech Incubator, is a nonprofit organization created by the city of LA and the Department of Water and Power um, in 2011. And our mission is to create an inclusive green economy. We're really grateful to be partners with the city. The three things we do on behalf of the region in pursuing our mission is unlocking innovation through incubating startups with an emphasis on supporting, recruiting and supporting underrepresented founders, transforming markets through partnerships, catalytic partnerships at the regional level, public-private partnerships to advance policies and pilots that help transform the region, and then enhancing communities primarily through workforce training, but also things like our Women in Clean Tech, trying to really support women coming into the clean tech space, whether as a founder or any other way. And we're also running a national city climate innovation challenge, which we just had an exciting announcement recently in New York with our partners at Rockefeller Foundation, and the Waverly Street Foundation, while not public yet, is supporting our work uh, um, in LA around resilient rebuilding as well. We're running a resilient rebuilding cup to find startup innovations that can help the region rebuild better. So we're looking for more partners there. If anybody wants to learn more, please reach out. So that's Lacey. The commission was created by Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, Supervisorial District 1. She represents the Palisades and Sunset Mesa and Malibu that were devastated by the fires. The thinking she had was to create an independent commission, meaning we don't report back to the county, we don't report back to the city, we don't report back to the state. We're truly independent in the sense that they're not trying to dictate the recommendations we make in any way, and really more than anything, lift them up. And so we've been engaging with, of course, policymakers and stakeholders and communities to shape our recommendations. We put out initial of early action recommendations in March, just flagging key issues uh, with elected officials and their staff. We followed up with an initial set of more comprehensive recommendations at the end of April. And then we're about to release on June 20th our final recommendations. So that's just a bit on the process. We have 20 members, each an expert in their own right. And then we're supported with research and logistical support from UCLA, as well as Ramey and Associates. So I'll pause there and let you, I can dig into some of the recommendations or pivot in any way you want.
Yeah, I know the 30-day recommendations are out. I just shared the link in the chat. There was a public comment period, which is now over, and there is going to be an upcoming period of socializing this, but also engaging with different survivor groups and other stakeholders. Could you tell us in the best case scenario, what are the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve with the recommendations that are currently out?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose for the commission, I should also add, is distinct from other rebuilding efforts that were announced initially, sort of publicly, I suppose. I think there are a lot of local groups and nonprofit organizations working on these issues more broadly and in their communities, but is explicitly focused on resiliency and sustainability. So our name is the Blue Ribbon Commission for Climate Action and Fire Safe Recovery. And using that as our lens, have been putting forth recommendations that we think are going to make the community stronger, more resilient, and of course, reduce the environmental impact while enhancing survivability. So as a small but very important example, homes that were built before 1978 were built to current energy codes or before there was an energy code. And as you look at things like fire resistant materials, one of the things that is critical is a high performance window to reduce the likelihood of glass shattering and the heat penetrating. And it doesn't mean it's going to prevent a fire, but it's part of how you create a more defensible home and fire safe home. That also comes with a high degree of energy efficiency benefit and comfort in the home. So windows being sort of a great cross-cutting example. So the recommendations have been put forth. Some are at the local level, some are state. Um, I think our top line recommendations that I'd flag here for this conversation are twofold. One is a proposal for a resilient rebuilding authority. Years ago, local government had something known as redevelopment authorities, and that power was taken away to capture the tax revenue at the state level under Jerry Brown. Um, Obviously, he did a great job in bringing the state's budget in balance, but that took away an important tool for local governments. And it was envisioned that that tool could be used for disaster rebuilding. But cities and counties don't have that right anywhere to take tax increment financing to fund redevelopment. So that's number one, is that we're asking the legislature and the governor to give either a singular or a specific community uh, uh, rebuilding authorities to have that power, along with the remit to assemble land, to buy land at fair prices, to give homeowners who are selling an option besides selling to speculative developers or private equity firms who are rolling up properties, um, to then take those lots and keep some perhaps in sort of buffer zones within neighborhoods to create pocket parks, and then assemble the rest of the land to, and this would be in consultation with neighborhood representatives, is what we're envisioning, and then assemble the land, select a builder or builders to then build homes that could be sold with the first priority given to those that had lived in the properties January 7th or before, but whether they were renters or homeowners, but had to leave and didn't own, or their family. So that's what, at a very high level, what we're looking at recommending. And the idea is to really help remove obstacles. Of course, it's not to supplant local government, but to really help provide the resources. And then how can it come up with financial tools in partnership with philanthropy, the private sector, and government to really bridge the gap of, when we talk to community groups in Altadena and Pasadena and Sunset Mesa and Malibu and across the board, the gap in the cost of rebuilding is usually more like $250,000 to $500,000. It's not tens of thousands of dollars between what you had if you were lucky enough to have insurance, and the cost of rebuilding. So that's number one. The second is longer term strategy of, and when we say longer term, we're thinking decades, obviously, is a fire control district that would be put on countywide ballot and would assess a parcel tax across the county to pay for a buffer zone that's maintained. We know that where there has been a buffer zone, let's say in Santa Barbara, where it was some ag land, in that case, orchards, avocado or citrus, really help prevent fires coming into the urban areas in the WUI. And so it's much more than that, but also look at retrofitting homes to have screens on vents and other things that are critical for increasing defensibility, survivability, and therefore insurability. So there's a number of other recommendations we're making, including recommending to the legislature and the governor provide funding for income sensitive funding to pay for some of the first cost increase for families to, I would say one thing, as we've talked to neighborhoods, a lot of people want to build all electric, and a recent UC Berkeley study showed if you do, you save $9,000 versus putting in a gas line at the same time, because current state code requires putting in, if you don't build all electric, you have to also, if you build with gas, you have to put in the electric lines to convert to all electric in the future. So, but still, some of these measures on home hardening and the things like backup solar and power, battery generation in disaster to be able to pump water out of the cistern, to defend your home, to douse it in future fire events. These are the sorts of things we want to be able to see families be able to put in their homes. We're not requesting anybody mandate all electric or putting in solar and storage or water cisterns to defend your home, but we do think those are critical aspects. So that's a high level overview. There's a lot more I can go into that goes from insurance to, uh, um, you know, we are calling for better clarity on soil testing and clean up. The challenges, of course, of is who's going to pay for additional cleanup if there are as lead contamination, for example, found on properties. I don't know if anybody has an easy answer for that, but we are at least asking for greater clarity and support for testing.
Yeah, thank you. I think that touches on so many different areas. Recovery is not simple by any means. There's the infrastructural sort of lens, and there's the, small business economic recovery piece of it, natural resources, and the community capacity building element. So I think that the last question I'll ask you, Matt, before I open it up to our other speakers to respond to some of the things you said, is what can you share about the role of philanthropy? You started to touch on it. Besides the partnering with philanthropy to unlock capital that's available for these projects, what does it look like to give philanthropy a say or perhaps even a seat at the table? Because I know some of the funders who have been involved in early recovery so far are really curious about how to connect with the recommendations that are coming out, the second
Yeah.
set.
Yeah, I have a couple observations based on previous experience I did and the work I did after Hurricane Katrina. To spent 8 years working in New Orleans after Katrina to rebuild and build 5 single-family homes in a community center there, and partnered with the school district to rebuild better schools and helped 10,000 different homeowners. Our team did at the time, along with other efforts after Superstorm Sandy and even um, the earthquake in Haiti. But the the thing that I would say is, like, how can your philanthropy be catalytic? I mean, in disaster response, nothing beats cash, right? How do you put those solutions on the table while balancing for concerns around fraud? How do you get money in the hands of families who need it, assistance quickly and easily? And one of the ideas that's come up is parametric insurance, which once there's a triggering event, people would get an immediate cash payout. It would be small, but it would give everybody, wouldn't have to work with adjusters, et cetera. So, but in the case of rebuilding and recovery, it's a years and unfortunately decade plus long effort that requires patience and persistence. So number one, I'd say, please think about being in it for the long haul. The second I would think about is catalytic philanthropy. How can you put money into, let's say, if somebody's working on a loan product that has got concessionary rates, how do you provide your philanthropy to buy down the cost of the interest, to provide a loan loss reserve? We did a fund like that to pay for energy efficiency retrofits in New Orleans. And we're, look, we have Lacey has a debt fund that uses philanthropy for PRI for the corpus, grant capital for the operating expenses and the loan loss reserve. So how can you be catalytic as these products come to the fore? A lot of these, the needs for, as we're like Habitat for Humanity, I've been on the board there forever, and they're offering a silent second is what they're calling it, of 100 up to $150,000. In most cases, those, like, you want to recapture those loans, but a lot of them are not going to be recoverable, and you're there to help. And so, in this context, some of it is going to have to be, put up as debt, but build in some measure of forgiving some of that capital for those that particularly in need. But it really, I think long term, think strategic and catalytic. In the case of rebuilding and recovery, obviously there's a lot of great existing CDFIs and nonprofit organizations like Habitat and many others that are here and willing to help. There's some capital out there and partners who are kind of looking for a solution to, a problem to help solve for that. It's tough because if you already are struggling to pay your mortgage and you need that additional gap of $250,000, $500,000, and don't have the income to support additional debt, it's going to be hard. And that's what we need to figure out. And then I guess the last piece is really fund advocacy. We need to advocate in Sacramento and, of course, Washington, which is its own challenge these days, for helping families to be able to return and rebuild.
Thanks for your recommendation on all those strategies, Matt, especially that last piece about advocacy and representing community voice, which I think ties very much so into the next part of our conversation. I will also mention briefly that in terms of philanthropic capital being catalytic, there is an open RFP for a PRI right now called the LA Wildfire Rebuilding and Renewal Fund. That's being co-led by Cal Wellness and California Community Foundation. It is not online and public. So if you're interested in receiving that RFP, reach out to me and I will let you know, or I will connect you with the right person on that team to share more information. There's a soft close at the end of this month, which is actually now, but there might be some flexibility if you're very, very interested. And there is also a CDFIs table that is starting to come together, organized by Schwab. So I think there's a lot of readiness, a sense of readiness that the lending industry really wants to provide. And some lenders have also partnered with county government for some of the relief funding that's been available. So we see that happening now, and we'd like to see this continue in that longer arc, just as you recommended, Matt. And so now I'd love to turn to our other speakers who are themselves survivors of the fires and they represent different survivor networks. And I'd love to give them the first pass at responding to anything that Matt shared in the recommendations or just in ways that we can see more cross-sector partnership throughout recovery. Maybe, Andrew, I might call on you because advocacy was mentioned, and that's really relevant to what Department of Angels is doing. So perhaps you can start with a brief intro of yourself, your role, and then maybe start to talk a little bit more around the advocacy piece that you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew King, and I am here representing the Department of Angels. Just a little bit about myself. Until about 4 weeks ago, when I joined the Department of Angels, I was a high school principal. So I've been in public education for almost 20 years, and I lost my home in the Altadena fire in January. And since then, I've been trying to figure out a way to really help and give back to the community. The Department of Angels was formed in
Oh no, Andrew, I think your connection might have frozen. Maybe could Jill or May, maybe we'll have, yeah, Jill, I saw you come off mic. Maybe you'll go first, and then when we get Andrew back, we'll continue.
Sure. Sounds good. Hello, everybody. My name is Jill Hawkins, and I'm from a proud native, Pasadena, Altadena, Sierra Madre area. I currently live in Sierra Madre, and I'm one of the founding members of the Eaton Fire Collaborative. I own an event management firm here in the community and been working in our community for over 22 years. And so when the fires happened immediately after, I started working with Daryl Qualls and a group of local nonprofit community organizations, the city, the county, and state officials. And we came together to try to help coordinate recovery efforts in a better manner. And so we really started to understand that the challenges were bigger than just distribution drives that we were facing. And we wanted to make sure we had a space to provide vetted, accurate information. So we started out with a very small group, and now we are over 100 partner organizations that are part of the Eaton Fire Collaborative in an effort to have equitable rebuild and recovery. And it's a simple mission, but vital, that we have coordinated response, clear communication, so that resources and assistance and information is gotten to those that are in need, especially our most vulnerable community members. So right now we're in the process of building out a long-term recovery group. And it'll expand the collaborative and help survivors with the most unmet needs and helping work with the funders on a funding table to support those needs. So I think in response to Matt, I think we've talked about this a little bit offline, and then we can go back to the advocacy. Matt, the Blue Commission report, everything, there was a lot about infrastructure. And one of my challenges back was basically about interim infrastructure. So people who are ready to build and ready to get back on their properties, ready to move back into their standing structures, and ensuring that they have access to the utilities immediately while a long-term infrastructure plan is put into place. So that's one of the things we're hearing from our community.
And Andrew, I thank you, Jill, for sharing. And I think that is a really important insight because people are more likely to rebuild if they have interim housing, especially nearby, so that they can oversee that very long process of rebuilding. So Andrew, I see that you are back. I know you're dealing with some connectivity issues, but we're really glad that you're here. Would love to have you pick up where you left off.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. Obviously, I was always sharing I'd lost my home, and this is one of those things where you don't have reliable internet anymore. And so it's just a really good example of the things you have to deal with when you're a survivor. As I was saying, the Department of Angels was set up between the California Community Foundation and the Spiegel Family Fund with the intention of ensuring that communities that were impacted by the fires are able to help lead the recovery versus having recovery done to them. A common refrain that you hear a lot is that disasters are not discriminatory, but recovery is. And so our goal is to ensure that we lift up community voices as best as possible. And one of the key things that we're really trying to do first is ensure that we reach as best as possible 100% of impacted residents in both communities so that as we're informing the recovery process, no one is going through recovery alone. And so one of the people that you'll hear from today, May, is from Team Palisades. That's one of the groups that we're supporting in Palisades. We're also supporting All Together in Altadena, as well as a variety of other partnerships. The goal, like I said, is to ensure that we bring community voice to all these spaces, whether it's through philanthropy, whether it's with government partners, whether it's just in being the convening table for all these multiple grassroots organizations that are trying to help everyone recover. One of my comments, just in response to what Matt was sharing, is that I agree. There is kind of the 1 to 3 year, 3 to 5 year, 5 to 10 year phases of recovery. And it's really important that philanthropy doesn't just to give all their money right in the very beginning. Direct relief is absolutely important, especially when it comes to things like folks not being able to afford their mortgage and their rent once their insurance money runs out. But another thing I want to flag is that when you have a lot of individuals on the ground, especially since they're new, that are hoping to help our impacted residents in both communities, I urge our philanthropic partners to be a little bit more flexible with the expectations of our newer partners that are not legacy organizations, because most of them are reluctant leaders that were impacted themselves that are just trying to do right by their community and neighbors, but they don't necessarily know yet how to run a 501c3, or they're still trying to figure out fiscal sponsorships. And so I ask for that flexibility so that we're not overburdening them as they try to figure out their own recovery while also trying to be the leaders that our communities are looking to.
I think those are all excellent points, Andrew, and thank you so much for sharing your personal experience navigating all of this. I think that one of the things I'd like to highlight too, just listening to both Andrew and Jill so far, is that there are a lot of survivor networks that have started to come together and they're finding solidarity with each other across the different burn scars. Even though the communities are starting from different places, there are shared experiences of concerns over environmental health, mental health. And so this is something recent that is starting to happen as people have built coalition and then shared stories, resources across both types of communities. I am going to post the survivor networks that we currently know about in the chat, just so our funders who are joining this call can get a sense of just how vast this landscape is and how many groups have banded together to make sure that no one gets left behind. And all of these are focused on different things. So May, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself and your role in Team Palisades, as well as your background and how you're thinking about long-term recovery and anything you'd like to respond to in the first half of our webinar.
Thank you, Lily. My name's May. I'm an architect, and I've been a resident up in the Palisades for over 20 years. I raised 2 kids and started my business there. My home and my business were destroyed during the fire. And I am one of those reluctant survivor that Andrew talked about. I am currently a volunteer in Team Palisades. And basically, our goal is to build back trust and give the residents hope to build back and then come back to the community. One of the big issue I think we have is that the Palisades has the misnomer of being an enclave of rich and famous, which is not true. There are a lot of middle-class families, just like ours. There are 2 mobile home parks. And just on my street alone, I currently have a 90-year-old neighbor that is so shell-shocked, cannot leave his FEMA hotel room. I have 2 80-year-old widows that bought their home in the 60s in the Palisades because they couldn't afford Santa Monica, raised their family there, and lost their homes. I have a legacy family that's been in the Palisades for over 5 generations, and they've lost a total of 5 homes in the Palisades. And my neighbor herself, she's a single mother who lost her job due to the WGA strike since 2023, and has been State Farm insurance, insured by State Farm for over 30 years. And they canceled her on November 14th. She can't even get an SBA loan because she doesn't have a job. All these are real people. It's beyond just what you hear on the news of Steven Spielberg or Billy Crystal. There are a lot of us who are not rich and who are not famous, and who basically had a community around us, and we've lost our community. And as an architect, my role in the Team Palisades, I'm not only a block captain, I'm also a neighborhood organizer in the alphabets. I've been trying to help my neighbors navigate their way back in rebuilding. There's, over 80% of population has never built a custom home, has never built their home. And this was their biggest asset, emotionally and financially. Not only do they not have enough insurance, they don't have enough money to rebuild. These are all real issues that we need to deal with. Everybody is scared and they're unsure. They don't trust what's going on. And that's what we're trying to do in Team Palisades, because we're neighbors. We're everybody's neighbors trying to help each other. That's all we are. We're not saviors. We're not heroes. We're just neighbors trying to help each other, to bring hope and to bring trust back. And that's really part of the long-term survival that we're trying to build back. And the resilient community is person on person, people on people, and then trying to help each other, educate each other. And what I could do, whatever I could do in terms of helping people understand the current code and understand how to build their home back and how to build their home back most economically. That's my role in Team Palisades.
Thank you, May. And Matt, I know you have to hop early, so is there anything that you would like to say in response to what you've heard? I want to make sure that this feels like a dialogue. It's harder to do virtually, but would love to give you a chance to add any thoughts or reflections.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think my fellow panelists, just thank you for each of you, what you're doing. I know to not just survive and then do the work to help others is a calling that you didn't ask for, and I just say how important it is. I think I think all the points were raised were excellent ones. I mean, I think some of the strategies on how to get the interim infrastructure in place is a difficult one.
I think we might have lost Matt as well. I think this is just the reality of virtual meetings these
I hate
days.
to say welcome to Altadena with no internet.
Yeah, that is very real. I do see that we have a message from Matt thanking us for having him, and we may or may not see him back on, but he is sharing his contact information for anyone who wants to follow up with him. So I encourage you to do that as well if you'd like to learn more about Lacey's work or the Blue Ribbon Commission. All right, so actually, I just want to turn back to Jill, Andrew, and May. Thank you so much for sharing all of your stories and all the work that you are doing. I really do believe in the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and I think all of you are representative of that. And my question for all of you in any order is, what does an equitable recovery look like in your community? You've represented yourselves on this call, but you also are leaders of larger networks of folks that have started to organize, and you are the ones helping people navigate their own survival and long-term recovery. And so based on what you're hearing in this moment and beyond, what does equitable recovery look like?
I've heard May use this term a lot. It's a term we use a lot in education also, but like universal design, right? You really plan for folks in the margins. One thing I want to highlight, especially for our folks that are less connected to social media or less connected to the internet, they may not necessarily be elderly, but the reality is a lot of the information we're putting out there is online. A lot of the ways we were connecting with our neighbors prior to the fire was through dedicated landlines. And right now, what we're finding is all the information is out there, but they're not necessarily being filtered to the people that need it most because they're not connected. And so there is a lot of need for white glove or concierge service for those that are disconnected, because otherwise they're going through that recovery alone. And that does take money and that does take personnel on the ground. And we have a lot of folks that are doing really great work, like Team Palisades, like Altogether, but they're under-resourced and they're also, like I said before, going through their own recovery. And so there is some need for support to do that work.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally right on point, Andrew. And what the stories I hear every day, just in my profession as an architect, it's heartbreaking. I mean, the stories I just shared, you could time that 1,000 times over in the Palisades. And the people are concerned. I mean, the reality of gouging was real after we all left, we were all evacuated. We are all living in small places that charge us too much rent. And a lot of people's ALE are going to run out by the end of this year. Filling the gap is real. The financial reality for all of us, and some people, I mean, the elderly and also the people who are unemployed cannot apply for a grant, not even the SBA. Cannot apply for a loan, not even the SBA loan. They've been rejected multiple times already. So it's trying to fill that gap and also trying to build back a resilient community too, not just in terms of infrastructure, but also emotional infrastructure, because we have to regain our community's trust. A lot of people just don't even trust to come back to the community, not just financially, because is there safe water? Is there dependable infrastructure in terms of electricity? Our doctors, our local grocers are gone. Everything is gone. The schools are gone. My kids went to the local schools. They were able to walk to school. That's gone. Support system, the banks are gone. Our post office is still there. That's probably the only thing. And then all these things build up community. Even community centers are gone. So it's not just in terms of the financial, it's also in terms of the emotional that we need to build back.
And I'll just tag on to what both Andrew and May said. I think funding wise, this is kind of a couple stages of funding that need to happen. So we still have some really serious immediate needs. We still have people that are living in their cars. We have seniors who don't have places to live. They can't afford rent. So we have long-term renters who have been in Altadena forever, and now what are they going to do to come back? And so there's a strong need for long-term temporary housing. in our community. There's a strong need immediately for helping mixed status families and the underserved community and our seniors, I mentioned. And so I think stage one is that. Stage two is the long-term recovery. And so back to Andrew, I think mentioned, that's the hold off on your big pots for us. We really need to get everybody into disaster case management in a unified system to know what the needs are. What are we missing? What are the gaps? Who needs help? Meet them, the survivors, where they are. And what their needs are going to be. And once we get everybody into disaster case management, we'll have an unmet needs group that will know what the needs are. And then we'll reach out to the funders table to ask them to help. So can you help pour 500 foundations? That'll take a huge cost off of home rebuild. What are the needs? And making sure that those funders tables are substantially funded, because those will be overarching needs for our entire community, not just one population. So we're working really hard to get to that point. We're pushing quickly with the collaborative to get our long-term recovery group up so that we can get those things in motion. You know, there's things in the community. We're going to need a lot of mental health and wellness assistance, right? Overall, not just for the survivors, but for the people that are supporting the survivors who are living in this disaster world every day. How do we rebuild our business district, which is getting very little support currently, that is entirely burned down? They're not getting debris removal assistance. They're not getting much from their insurance companies. How do we help those small businesses, those local businesses rebuild? You can rebuild all the homes, but with no businesses, it's not our community. And then there's the advocacy road that's going to need to happen. We have a lot of members of the collaborative working on insurance advocacy. The insurance companies are not treating our survivors well in general. And that is a challenge. We've got people who are on their 6th, 7th, 8th adjusters, having to re-explain everything over and over and over every time they get a new adjuster. And then people are looking for assistance with things like building permit fee waivers and, you know, getting those into motion. So I think those are all things that come in stages, but we do need a big pot at the end, right? For the long-term recovery. So that would be my hope of the funders.
Yes.
And even beyond that is that for the long term, Palisades had an issue with evacuation. We only had two-way in and out. We are sort of an island that's sandwiched between Malibu and Santa Monica. We need long-term recovery and also resilient planning for evacuation. How do we shelter in place? All these issues that we're facing right now. And then, you know, and then also like, how do we evacuate the elderly? Most of the people who died during the fire were the elderly. How do we protect the vulnerable? And part of that is building back the community. And then the things that the funding for planning is important, is crucial for us for the long term. Is it rather is building back, is creating a climate resilient district, whether it is forming different groups of people that could help ourselves. I mean, what the community needs right now is far beyond what the government's been able to give us. And then that's why all of us are volunteers. And then most of the people in the Team Palisades, like myself, have full-time jobs. We also need to build back. We still need to make a living to build back. And what we're doing is that we're sharing our expertise. We also have people who are working on, the insurability issue, insurance issue. How are we going to get insured after we rebuild? Those are all real issues that we're confronting right now. And also the rest of the states is confronting, because we have no idea when the next catastrophe is coming. And with the current situation in terms of, the current economic situation, and then also the climate situation, there's a lot of things that we need to be able to plan for. And then we need resources in order to plan for those issues.
Yes, and I think I want to pull on the thread of the insurance piece because this is pretty central. And if anyone who is joining us today has not been tracking this, I think one assumption to debunk is just because you have insurance doesn't mean you're getting access to it. So this is the pain point that May, Jill, and Andrew are starting to touch on with all the stories that they're hearing. We've seen and heard stories about people who have been paying their premiums for decades and not able to access the benefits of having done so. And so this is a huge problem. And also another thing to kind of double click on is that small businesses are not able to get debris clearance in the same way as residential areas. And so a lot of the debris in commercial districts of the Eaton and Palisades area, a lot of the debris is still there. And so the recovery of communities really relies on the recovery of small businesses as well, so that people can afford to live in the areas that they want to return to in order to rebuild. So it's all very interconnected. So Andrew, I saw that you posted some of the acronyms in the chat. Your high school principal hat definitely is showing. I appreciate you clarifying that. And this is also a little bit off script, so I apologize to our speakers, but I wanted to be able to kind of let you talk more about the ways that you're convening others. So Jill, in particular, the Eden Fire Collaborative meets weekly, and you talked about the long-term recovery group infrastructure coming online. What are the ways that you'd like to engage philanthropy? What do you foresee looking forward in terms of need? And same question for May and Andrew after the fact.
Sure. Yes, we meet weekly. We've been meeting weekly since week one, and the group has just grown and grown. We have about 10 subcommittees now that are meeting as well to address different areas. I saw in the chat about childcare and education, and youth is a huge component in our community. We also have schools that burn down. A lot of our childcare centers that were operated out of homes or small business properties are gone, and their clients are gone, right? So even if they are able to find a new space to operate out of, they don't have the clientele that they once had. So there are a lot of needs as far as that goes. So the committees are working on kind of addressing, okay, what are our immediate needs? What are our long-term needs? All of which is building towards the LTRG, the long-term recovery group, and the committees that will fall in that will then be able to support the unmet needs. So those committees will be able to say, hey, we can provide mental health. We can provide, assistance to childcare centers. So the funding, that'll be part of that unmet needs. And those organizations that are all part of the collaborative are the ones who are going to need the funding to be able to provide the services to our community that address the needs, the most vulnerable needs in our community. So really finding out, I invite the funders to attend collaborative meetings and hear what we're talking about, hear what the needs are. We have a philanthropy group, but go sit in on one of the other groups, the housing group, and hear what they're talking about. We have a very strong housing group, and their needs are immediate. There are long-term, the rebuild and all of that, of course, but there are immediate needs with a lot of our committees. So there's that stage one funding that needs to happen, but we want to also then address the long-term funding. Again, I keep coming back to that, but I can't emphasize the importance of that enough.
Right. And Team Palisades, we meet weekly down in Clayco in Culver City on Friday afternoons, usually around 4 or 5. And also we also meet as the Alphabet Street group team on Fridays afternoons, but over Zoom. One of the other issues is like a lot of our community has scattered all over the country or all over the world. So the best way we found is actually through the social media apps, like WhatsApp. We have a very vibrant community group on WhatsApp, and then also through Zooms, and then just part of the thing like I've been doing too is just whenever I go back to the Palisades, I stop people and talk to them and ask them, are they getting help? Do they want to, do they want to be part of the group? And trying to recruit, block captains, because I mean, what we found is the best way to connect with the community is just through your neighbors, just block by block, person by person, and then just talking to people on the streets, and then building up our group that way. And also we also have different advocacy groups, and then everybody's kind of working on their specialties. And also there have been several charrettes, design charrettes I've been part of in terms of rebuilding back the Palisades, not just in terms of private homes, but also on the commercial side too. Um, it's trying to envision a bigger picture for everyone to come back to a more vibrant community, physically and emotionally, to come back to.
And then Andrew, did you also want to respond? Are there ways that you were looking to partner with philanthropy? I know Department of Angels is already anchored at CCF and also SNAP and Spiegel Family Fund, but are there other ways that you're looking at in the near future or even the long term that might be good ways for philanthropy to plug in?
Yeah, I think the biggest one of the big resources that we bring to the table, especially for our newer partners, is that relationship with philanthropy and bringing it directly to our newer voices in the space. And so a lot of our team members, like Team Palisades, all together, they are still looking for resources. And I think philanthropy can join us in our support of these organizations, whether it's through volunteering, through funding. I think the key thing that we're also trying to do is to be a convening space between Altadena and Palisades. One thing that we've noted before is that these weren't twin fires, but they were sister fires. And so the recovery will look a little bit different in Palisades and the Eaton area. However, a lot of the recovery and the learnings are going to be beneficial to both communities. And so while we do help the Palisades team kind of connect within their own community, and same with the Eaton Fire groups connect within themselves, we also want to be a convening table for both communities so that we can do things like state support or federal support to ensure that we get the funds for both communities in Los Angeles.
Great. And then I do see with our remaining time, oh, May, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, like what Jill said, there's a lot of issues we don't even know is happening yet. We're just going by day on this because things pop up all the time. I mean, is it even on the building side? There are issues that we have yet to encounter. So that's why I'm saying that, it's not, and then like Joe said, it's not just immediate. There's also, this thing could stretch out for decades. And if you look at, the other recoveries, what's happening in this Santa Rosa, in terms of Lahaina, there, it's not a one done deal. It's a continuing process. And yeah. So I'll post my information and then also the contact info for Team Palisades in the chat too.
Wonderful. And then May, I saw a question about the Team Palisades meeting. I caught that you said 4 p.m. on Fridays, but if there's any location that you'd like to share, feel free to share that in the chat and we can send that out as well with the post-webinar materials. And I know that recovery is long, and I think in this conversation, we got a sense of that longer picture strategic view with Blue Ribbon Commission, but the reality of survivors and grassroots organizations, community organizations, is that you do have to take it one step at a time. We are not out of the woods yet in terms of providing immediate assistance for those in the interim. And so I'm really glad that that was surfaced in that conversation with all of you today. I do see a couple questions in the chat, some of which were already touched upon. There's a lot of awareness about mental health needs. Thank you, Laura, for the question. There is a table of funders organized by California Community Foundation that's starting to gather and partner with Department of Mental Health to identify aligned investment as well as partnership opportunities. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. I can put you in touch with CCF. And if there's anything that you'd like to leave the audience with, I'll just open up this space for our remaining time. Any final thoughts?
Well, I'll speak professionally. So we at AIA, we're also forming groups in terms of building back more resiliently. There's a lot of exterior groups such as a design leadership network that I'm part of, and then also the case study 2.0. We're providing plans for people to rebuild. And then also Builder Alliance obviously is also looking at resources so we could keep the costs down in terms of building back the community. And these are all done voluntarily. And then the thing is that if we could get any additional funding so that we could broadcast it out to both Eaton and also the Palisades, that would be fantastic too.
I might add that the narrative that most people might be hearing is that things are getting better, things are improving, progress is made. And I don't want to downplay the fact that we've had a lot of lots cleared in both Palisades and Altadena. However, that narrative that might be out there does not match the trauma and pain that is still happening in our communities. So it may feel like it's been 5 months since the fire, but for those of us that are still dealing with it, I have children that are 6 and 8 that are going to the schools immediately outside the burn area. I am still concerned about their health and safety while trying to balance the need for them to have a stable community when they lost their home and they lost their neighborhood. And so, yes, it's been half a year, but please understand that for those of us that are still trying to go through this, it's going to be years for us. And so we need your help and your philanthropy to help support all of our neighbors on the ground and all of our teams on the ground.
And I'll just jump in and say, if you know the Altadena, Pasadena, Sierra Madre area, you know that we are a resilient community. We are a tight-knit community. All of our students are part of one school district. We've worked together since inception. And so we are strong, and I have no doubt that we will rebuild and we will recover quickly, efficiently, safely. It's just a process. And so we need your support along the process. I think that we need to remember what the survivors are going through. And to Andrew's point, it's an ongoing, never ending, even standing structures. They're in as bad of a position as people who lost everything, as far as trying to get back into their homes. So we need to figure out the ways to support. And I think my only request of funders is to talk to multiple organizations collaboratively. Don't go off of what one organization tells you the needs are. Get opinions from multiple organizations, because in our community, we have a lot of organizations doing the work, and not everybody are serving everybody, right? So that's the goal of our long-term recovery group, is to serve all.
I think that is such a great note to end on as well. So I want to thank you all for just being in community here virtually. I know this is more commonplace than not these days. You're also coming into this in the middle of your own grieving periods of your own losses. So I just want to name that and acknowledge my gratitude to you for sharing your stories as well as leading your communities through this very, very complex and long process. So I really encourage everyone who's here to reach out to Andrew, Jill, May, as well as Matt, to sustain your learning about this, because I can guarantee you they're going to be part of more conversations. We've all been part of a lot, and we still will be moving forward. And we'd love to bring you into the fold if you're interested. And looking at the list of people who are attending, I know I'm preaching to the choir. There are a lot of you who have been here from day one. So just really want to express that solidarity with everyone who keeps showing up and who wants to be a part of this. There are going to be many opportunities to engage. So please keep listening, keep plugging in, and hopefully you see our Funders Collaborative as one resource for funders, but you now have another inroad to all that's happening at the grassroots level through this conversation. So really want to thank our speakers again, and wishing everyone a good rest of your Friday afternoon, and I hope to be in touch. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.